Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Eric. I've been wanting to do movie reviews for a while now, and this is the very first one I'm planning on doing, which is Soul. So let's begin with the review. Soul is the latest Disney Pixar movie to come out on Disney+, and it's directed by Pete Docter, starring Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey. Jamie Foxx plays this music teacher called Joe Gardner, who's really trying to get into the music industry, but he feels like he's stuck as a music teacher. He's a really talented guy, but the classes that he's teaching and the students that he's kind of supporting, he doesn't really feel super inspired by, not as much as he does in terms of the idols that he looks up to in the music industry. He's kind of struggling at this point in his life, trying to figure if he wants to continue being a music teacher or if he wants to pursue his other passions in the music industry. When he was offered a long-term job as a music teacher, Joe starts to contemplate if this is the career path for him. Joe's like a super relatable character in this movie. I think we've all been where he is at kind of a crossroads between career paths, and it's something I personally found incredibly relatable to. The last thing I'll say about the setup for this movie is finally when Joe is offered his big breakthrough for a gig that he's really been wanting. He thought that he could never kind of attain this gig, and he's finally there. I assume a lot of you have had this feeling before, but finally when he's starting to break through, he slips and an accident happens and his soul gets pushed to another dimension of sorts called the Great Beyond. That's it for the main setup of this movie. I don't want to get into too many spoilers, so without further ado, let's get into what I liked and disliked about the movie. So when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I was really intrigued. It looked like Pixar was aiming to tell a more personal story about an individual here, and I've got to say they really did an amazing job with it. Joe is mixed in so many situations where he kind of finds out what he's really driven to in life and what it means to have a soul to begin with. Throughout the course of the movie, I was really intrigued by the questions this movie asked. So with that alone, it gets to really deep kind of complexities throughout the movie, which kind of makes it one of my more favorite movies of the year. And I know not a ton of movies have come out this year, but that doesn't take away from how excellent of a film I think this really is. One thing everybody knows about going into a Pixar movie is the amazing quality in animation. The visuals in this movie really pop, and I've got to say it's some of the best facial animation work I've seen in animation in general. There are scenes where they're playing music, jazz, and piano throughout the film, and they really do a great job at zooming into each person's features, and you really get a sense of how they feel as they're playing. There's certain conversations that happen throughout the course of the movie where you can really feel how these characters are feeling deep inside from moment to moment. There's a certain scene where Joe is talking to his mom over a disagreement in a way, and this is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie because Joe's at an internal conflict that his mom doesn't really agree with. And you can see that this has been brewing in him for a while. This conversation hadn't been had, or at least for Joe, it hadn't happened the way that he's wanted it to happen. There's very little camera work here. It's just camera focusing on Joe, camera focusing on his mom. And I think truly it's one of the most touching scenes in a movie that I've seen so far this year because it really explores the character's depth with not only words, but just animation. And I think that is great storytelling in my opinion. The other amazing thing I really want to talk about here is the use of nonverbal storytelling. And they use it many times throughout the film. There's a few scenes where Joe is in his classroom where you can tell that this isn't really the thing he wants to be doing for his entire life. And then there's a few times where he glances at some of his music idols on the wall, and you can see his demeanor change, especially when he enters this jazz bar later in the film. You can see his demeanor change just when looking at friends who are working in the industry, people he idolizes, and just people on the wall who have played at these venues before. You can tell that this is something he really enjoys with a passion. So as we follow Joe on our journey here, he encounters a few different characters along the way. One character he meets in the soul realm, or the Great Beyond is what we'll call it for this review, is a character called 22, played by Tina Fey. Tina Fey does a great job at really bringing a certain kind of feel to her character that's different than Joe. They kind of clash a lot throughout the film, so it's someone that Joe is finding a hard time to read and get along with. But she does bring her own complexities to the role. She's very energetic, but she's very stubborn. Something that Joe isn't himself, at least not what he sees in himself at first. There's a lot of similarities between these characters, and I think both actors, Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey, do a great job and great chemistry throughout the film at really excelling bringing these characters to life. I really liked Jamie Foxx in this role, and I think he brought a lot to the character as well. They put him in quite a few different situations that I honestly wasn't expecting for this movie, and I think he knocked all of them out of the park, to be honest. It's probably one of his best roles that I can actually think of. He's done a great job in so many other films, but in terms of voice acting, I can't think of one that he's done better in, so I'd have to give him top marks for this for sure. As for the story itself, I think it really gets off to a great start. Like I was saying, the use of visual storytelling is used predominantly in the beginning of the movie, but that carries out throughout the entire film as well. Out of all the Pixar movies I've watched, many have made me laugh, cry, but the thing that this movie does better than any other that I've seen are the questions that it poses to its viewers. And it asks quite a few questions throughout the course of the film as well, which is something to me that separates it from other films, especially other animated films as well. The last 40 minutes of this movie is where I really think it shines. Throughout the film, it's asking you all these various questions, and you're left to wonder what they all mean by the end. And what I think makes this movie from good to excellent are the handling of these questions. It doesn't quite spoon feed you everything all at once, or doesn't spoon feed you all the answers in general. The viewer's kind of left to decide how they interpret the questions themselves to begin with. When looking up some information about this movie for the review, I was really interested in how this movie came to be in the first place. So I saw somewhere that the director, Pete Docter, came up with the idea for this movie when thinking about the concepts of human personalities or determinism when human lives come to be. And that's something that I think the movie does a pretty good job at asking questions about and really making you think by the end of the film, how have those been played out in my life? And how does that relate to me in general? Which I think, again, really speaks to the deeper complexities of this movie as well. Now, since no movie is perfect, I'd like to talk about some of the parts of this movie that I don't think were quite as good as the others that I was talking so glowingly about. One of those being the Great Beyond. And like I said earlier, this is a place that Joe eventually goes to. I won't get into too many details about this place, but just know that for me, whenever they got to this other place, that the jokes didn't quite land as much. The characters weren't quite as engaging. Part of the reason why I don't think I liked this part of the movie as much was because it was very abstract. The characters were abstract, and the setting was presented in a very abstract way as well. So nothing really felt super relatable about the scenes that were depicted in this place. Whereas back on Earth, everything was super relatable. So it always made me feel like, okay, can we hurry up this part in the movie so we can get back to the scenes on Earth? Because that was honestly so much more relatable. The second and last thing I think they could have done a better job with in this movie is a character called Terry. And I wasn't a huge fan of this character initially, and they never really grew on me throughout the course of the film. This is another character from The Great Beyond, so it kind of falls in line with the other part I didn't like about this movie. But they kind of invented this character to be like the bad guy in the movie, and to create a threat that our main characters might not reach their goal by the end of the movie. It's a sort of obstacle in a way throughout the course of the film that they had to kind of jump around and, work together to get past. But I think they set this up really well already in the beginning of the film with the situation that Joe is in itself. I don't think they needed to add this other character to kind of chase after them to get what he wants. And I won't go into too many more details here about Terry, but I think, to be honest, the story in itself could have been much better if Terry was not in it at all. Terry kind of feels like the comedic villain in this movie, and a lot of jokes are made around this as the movie is trying to be a little self-aware, which I will give them marks for trying that, but they kind of just do the same joke with him over and over again. They know this guy's kind of annoying, and they kind of play it off as such throughout the film. But to me, it just simply comes off as annoying. Luckily, my two biggest gripes of the film don't play a huge role, and they don't have a lot of screen time throughout the film. The Great Beyond is a place that they kind of just go and visit and leave eventually, and Terry is a character that only kind of shows up in the last half of the film to do anything of significance. So they don't spend too much time here, which is why I'm not going to dog this movie a lot when it comes to the things I didn't like as much about it. So with all that being said, guys, I really think this movie knocked it out of the park. There's a few gripes I have with it, but it doesn't outweigh all the amazing things that this movie does. The questions it asks, the animation that it has, and the overall story that it's trying to tell, I think do an exceptional job. And it's one of my favorite movies of the year, which is why I'm going to give Soul a 9 out of 10. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I think you should do yourself a favor and give it a watch. I think it's one of the best movies to come out this year. If you're a big Pixar fan, then you're definitely going to enjoy this movie. I'd rank it pretty high up with some of the other great Pixar movies. And if you want something that's just fun to watch with the family, this is probably a movie you can just settle down on the couch and watch. That's my review for the movie Soul. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm really excited to review more movies like this on the channel moving forward. So let me know what movies you would like me to see review next. And if you've seen Soul, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below.
Oh my god! Oh, that was amazing, Eric. Oh my god. I think Eric's gonna play the game.